Today I'm taking a look at a really popular plasma cutter that's sold on Amazon to see if it's worth it at the $250 price tag. It's actually marked down on sale sometimes as low as 200 bucks, and that is less than some grinders. It seems to me, I haven't done an analysis on this or anything, but it feels like the gap between expensive tools and cheap tools is getting wider, right? The high-end stuff, name brands are going up, while a lot of the lower cost entry-level stuff is going down, and it makes me wonder if it's worth it. BestArc did send this out to me, which is important to disclose, but honestly, I'm harder on products that companies send out than I am on stuff that I bought, which probably isn't fair, but if I bought it and it's a piece of junk, then I feel like a real idiot. So I'm gonna give you the straight story on it. If they don't like anything I say, well, it doesn't really change anything that I'm gonna do in the future, so that's fine, it'll help you out. Let's take a look at the build quality on this. It has a steel case, which is nice to see, and these protective corners are going to keep it from getting dinged up. So that's good to see. I look up here, this cover on over the screen, that's feeling pretty thin. I wouldn't hit that too hard. But it does have a nice air pressure regulator knob up on the front. The work clamp cable right here feels pretty good, actually. It's nice and soft and relatively pliable. The work clamp, you know, obviously when you have something at this cost, there are compromises you have to make, and this one is pretty thin, but functionally I think it'll work pretty good because it has the copper contacts up here as well as that ribbon cable between them. So I think from a functional perspective, they took their compromises in the right place on this. The torch itself has a sheath around it. It's pretty thin little sheath around the cable, but there's this ball pivot right there on the torch, which is nice, and then a cover over the trigger, which is pretty typical. Now this is a high frequency start plasma cutter, so it's not going to be good for a CNC table. Up here by the nozzle, you can see there's this standoff that'll help to hold a gap between that nozzle and your actual workpiece. Now around here on the back of the machine, the switch, you know, feels heavy duty, like it'll do the job. And then it has a fitting already for your air compressor line, and it has a water separator, if you look right there, with a protective case around it so it doesn't get broken. And it does include an adapter for 115 volts that you can plug in to be able to run on dual voltage. So that's a pretty nice touch as well. So one thing I did notice is the screen's really bright. It has a couple of readouts. You have your air pressure right here, which is a nice digital readout, and then a bar graph for the air pressure on the side. So you can turn that up right here. Now when you're adjusting air pressure, it's gonna drop when you pull that trigger. So you can press this button right here, and that'll flow some air to be able to adjust it up into the range. And so it can sit right in that 30 to 60 PSI range. I might give it just a little bit more. And then right here, you can adjust between 2T and 4T. So 2T is you pull the trigger to cut and then let go and you're done. 4T, you pull the trigger and release to start and then do that again to stop. Right here, this allows you to change a couple of other parameters. This right here is PT. That's post time. That's how long the air will continue to flow after it's finished. Its default is 3 seconds, but I think I'm going to turn it up. And the other one is the pilot arc time. It can go anywhere from you know, up to 15 seconds. All right, so I figure go big or go home. We have about a foot-long cut on some 1/2-inch plate. It's really quite clean throughout, and you can see right here, I think my travel speed is pretty good. Right here is where I sped up too much and had that little blowback there, so that was my fault. But along the way here, really, you know, $250 for a plasma cutter, it's pretty impressive on that 1/2 inch steel. So this right here is dross, and it's left over on the bottom side. Usually it's worse if you're cutting too slow, but there can be several reasons why you get more than others, especially on thicker plate. What I want to see is how easily it chips off. So now that I'm looking more closely, I see a little taper here. This, remember, is flipped over, so this was the end of my cut. And I think it's because I was trying to lay these guides flat where I was holding this really nice and vertical before. But if you notice, one of these guides is bent up a little bit, and so I think by trying to hold it exactly flat on the guide, I made things worse. So I might try to straighten that out. For the next cut test, I've moved to some 1/4 inch or 6mm long plate. I'm going to cut about a 12-inch long cut on that and see how it goes. I expect to be able to cut quite a bit faster with this thickness of material, and I think it'll be a lot more comfortable with this amperage range, but we'll see. Okay, so I can't catch just a little bit of dross right on there. Let's see. That's the cut I got. Now, I'll just mention that even with my high-end plasma cutters, it's hard to completely eliminate dross on a hand cut. On an automated cut, you can get pretty close sometimes, but anyway, here on the 1/4 inch, I feel like this is the thickness, this and thinner, where this is just right at home. The thicker material, the 1/2 inch thick, it definitely did it, but if I were doing that on the regular, I think I'd want a little more amperage. 3/8, you'd probably be just fine with this, but here at 1/4 inch, I mean, I was cruising through pretty fast and it just felt comfortable. All right, I'm gonna try it out on some 18 gauge, cutting out some shapes. I don't usually do a lot of art. My art's more engineering, but we'll try it out like this anyway and see how it does. I turned it down to 30 amps for this. Now, so far, everything has been edge cutting, where I'm starting off the edge and then moving into my cut. Sometimes you need to pierce through the center of your material to cut a hole out. Let's test out the piercing on this torch on 1/4 inch thick material. Now, plasma cutters can cut all sorts of different metals. Let's try this out on 1/4 inch thick aluminum. Let's test the cutter out on expanded metal. So after the arc transfers, it seems like the pilot arc goes out and it has to reinitiate. So that happened in between each, so I had to pace based on that, just giving a little pause to start the arc in between. But overall, I got a pretty good cut. Let's try one more. So this is a dual voltage machine. I'm going to go ahead and connect the adapter and plug it into a regular outlet and try it on some 1/4-inch plate running on 120 volts. Indicator shows it's on the 110 volt side of the circuit, and the maximum amperage in this case is 35. Let's see if it'll handle that 1/4-inch. All right, well, I blew the breaker. I made it this far before popping a dedicated 20 amp circuit with nothing else on it. Let me reset that and we'll finish it. So I've put an amp meter here at my plug to see how much this thing's actually drawing when I'm running it maxed out on 120 volts. All right, the cut's pretty clean up here. I was clearly traveling more steadily. Back here, especially where I blew the breaker, it's a little choppy. But if you look right here, what the machine's capable of is not too bad on the cut quality side of things. So the amperage draw was over 40 on this, which is in line with what it shows in the manual. You can go up to 45 amps on 120 volts. Now, power factor and other things are going to play into this, but that's beyond the scope of this video. Either way, it doesn't appear to be a very efficient machine. The rated efficiency in the manual is 60%. So at the end of the day, is this a bargain or is it a boat anchor? Well, the answer to that is it really depends. Now, having a $250 plasma cutter available is awesome because it makes it way more affordable than it was when I was getting started. And so more people can get into metalworking and have this technology available. But at the same time, you can't ignore the fact that when you're talking about the lowest end of the price range on any given product, there are compromises that have to be made. So let's talk about the good and the bad. We'll start off with what was good. Well, it will cut. It performed its intended function, and that's the main thing. I cut everything from 18 gauge up to 1/2-inch thick steel without any problem. That 1/2-inch thick was right at the top end of the range, and so I was moving pretty slow, but on the 1/4-inch, it was right at home. I was able to cut through aluminum without any issue and pierce, cut the expanded metal that I tried on it, and so it works. I thought it was really easy to set up, to connect everything, to adjust the air pressure with the air pressure regulator on the front and a digital readout for it. The screen is easy to read. There aren't a lot of menus. The buttons are super simple to understand here on the front. So I thought that was really good. So it's a really great unit from that perspective. Now, on the bad side of things that maybe aren't as good as some other higher end options, I think that the torch feels like it's, it's well made, but it's a more budget friendly design and just overall feel to the moldings. I think these standoffs here are pretty cumbersome to use, especially if you're trying to use a guide next to them or things like that. It definitely worked, but that style makes it a little harder to get a precise cut for me personally. The sheath around the torch right here and the lead, I mean, it's pretty thin, and I think in an industrial setting, or if you're dragging this around all over the place, it would probably not hold up for a really long time. But it does perform its intended function. The electrical cord right here, I know it's a small thing, but this is really short, and so that's kind of a pain sometimes. But overall, you know, those are some minor things from the exterior. Now, the fact that it blew the breaker and drew so many amps on 120 volts, I think that could create some issues if you're trying to cut, you know, 1/4 inch thick steel on a regular 120 volt outlet. You might run into some problems with that. So just keep that in mind, that it really isn't the most efficient machine electrically. I'm sure it doesn't have like power factor correction or any of those types of things. So I think for a $250 plasma cutter, you're getting a really good deal here. If you are looking to do this, you know, get more serious about it, work more professionally, or if you want to go on a CNC plasma table, I would look to stretch the budget a little bit higher to something else. That being said, there is nothing wrong with the way this works. So definitely a really good deal at the price that it's at.